We go through birth, death process. We grow. And God decided that he was going to take no shortcut this time. Going to take a lot longer. I won't create human beings a whole host. But I'm going to create families, and I'm going to let people enjoy watching children grow up from babies to toddlers to teens to eventual adults. He could have designed human beings to reach their full maturity much quicker. You know, by the time you get to be in older grade school, you have pretty much all the brain cells you're going to have for your life. Now, you don't have, obviously, all the psychological and emotional experience and stuff yet that an adult has, but you're not going to get any more brain cells. God could have worked something out that maybe after 5, 10 years we would reach maturity and go on our own. There's no other animal. I think in the animal kingdom, the longest other animal stays with its parents maybe 6 years. We stay 18 years. And God decided that I'm going to let you enjoy children for that space of time, that it's not just going to zip by. Got this quote, it said, autumn leaves are a lot like raising kids. First they turn on you, then they fly away. And the next thing you know, you look out the window and they're back. That's what happens sometimes with children. We would like that 18-year window, and sometimes it gets a little longer. But they are God's creation, and he uses us as parents. He uses society, he uses school, he uses especially the church to mold them into his image. And God's art is seen in morality. God wants truth in the inward being. We're always thinking about the outward appearance. She is cute as Hannah Montana. Is he a big hunk? And God goes for the heart. Hollywood goes for the looks and is morally disastrous. God goes for the heart. God is not near as concerned how we look on the outside as how we reflect his image from the inside. And he gives us as parents in the church roughly 18 years to polish this mirror that it might reflect clearly his image. God wants no distorted funhouse mirror that gives a poor image of who he is. You know, the Hubble telescope was so precisely polished, like the nearest 10,000ths or 100,000ths of an inch, that if you expanded that whole mirror to the size of the Gulf of Mexico, which is 1,500 miles in diameter, the most the mirror could be off was maybe 1 inch if it were that huge. Well, God wants no distorted mirror among his children either. And God's art is seen in their ability to make choices. Nothing in creation except man and angels, or fallen angels in this case, have the ability to say no to their creator. The birds can't say, I don't want to fly south for the winter this winter. It's too far. I'm just going to hang out up here. Everything is either run by the physical or biological or instinctive laws of this universe except human beings. And even as children, they have the capacity to say yes or no to God. That's part of bearing God's image. God knew that when he created man, that he created a potential rebel. That's not the way he wanted it to go, but he had to give man that freedom, or there couldn't be a voluntary love relationship. And that makes them of infinite worth because they can choose to partner with their Creator. And it's true, we may choose to follow our hormones instead of God, but we can never deny that we had no choice, because we obviously had choice. That's part of bearing God's image. Now, God is a wise creator. He makes no junk. God has never created a useless human being yet. Roman numeral 2, worth is determined by its usability. Genesis 1:28, again, God said, fill the earth, and then this is your job description. I want you to subdue it. I want you to rule over every living creature on the face of this planet. No creature on this planet is more usable to God, and no creature has more potential for usability than a child. You know, Dwight Moody, the Billy Graham of the 1800s, came back one night from doing evangelistic crusade in a church or whatever, and he said to his wife, well, 2.5 people got saved tonight. And she chuckled a little at that. How can you have half a human being? So she said, well, who was the child who came to Christ? And he said, oh, no, 2 children got saved. He said the half person was an adult in his late 50s, and most of his life is gone by him. He'll only have a few decades, if that, left to serve the Lord. But he said these 2 children will have their whole life ahead of them to serve Christ. And then the greater the usage, the greater the value. And we got pencils in the pew. You can buy a whole stack of them for probably $1, $2, whatever they go for down at Staples, because pencil generally has one function. You can write something with it, use the other end to erase it, and that's about all a pencil is good for. Contrast that to a steam engine. It's much more complex, but it has infinitely more uses. Steam engine opened the West with the railways. We now have diesels that are more efficient, but it was the steam engine that started that. Steam engines made us no longer at the mercy of the winds on the ocean. You could go back and forth on the ocean under your own power, not depending on trade winds. Steam turbines to generate electricity. And the list goes on, and so does its value. Or how about nail clippers versus a Swiss Army knife? You can only do one thing with nail clippers, that's clip your nails. Swiss Army knife, it's got all these things in it. It's a veritable army all folded up in this very complex knife. Some companies have made their whole logo based on how versatile and how good their product is. Nothing runs like a Deere, John Deere tractors. It's hard to stop a train air conditioners. And the potential of a child is limitless because they can be molded for good or for ill. You know, like someone said, they're a blank slate. What do we put on them? Jesus said in Matthew 18:6, if anyone causes these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. You know, it would be better to have cement overshoes and be dropped in the ocean than to cause a child to stumble. Somebody wrote a parable for our times. Once upon a time, there was a church staff looking for teachers for their young people, children and preschoolers for the new Sunday school year. And some adults said, I don't want to leave the sweet fellowship and study in my adult class. But the drug pusher on the street said, not even the threat of jail will keep me from working with your children. And some adults said, we have to be out of town too often on the weekend. But the porno book dealer said, we're willing to stay in town weekends too to accommodate your children. And some adults said, I'm unsuited, untrained, unable to work with children or preschoolers. But the movie producer said, we'll study, survey, and spend millions to produce whatever turns kids on. And some adults said, I could never give the time required to plan and go to teachers' meetings. But the pusher, the porno book dealer, the movie producer said, we'll stay open whatever hours are necessary every day to win the minds of your kids. You know, the world knows the value of our children. Does the church? You know, wet cement, like wet clay, has endless possibilities for being molded. But once it's hardened, you can't do anything with it. You can't pour water and hardened cement and say, I'm going to rework it. The water just lays on top. it's no longer possible to go into the cement. And they have this great potential for salvation. Again, Matthew 19:14, let the children come to me, do not hinder them. Why? Because the kingdom of heaven belongs to these. Children are just so naturally trusting. And the church, we're great at running an ambulance service at the bottom of a cliff. We have support groups galore in churches. We have Christian counseling centers springing up all over the place, and I'm not against that. We live in a fallen, broken world, and anything that helps people, I'm for. But wouldn't it be nice to build some fences at the top of the cliff so our kids wouldn't fall over? You know, kids club, Sunday school, youth group, junior church. It is far easier to mold a child than it is to mend an adult. That's why an adult conversion usually takes a crisis, because the cement is hard and God has to crack it open with some tragedy, some crisis, something to get our attention. He doesn't have to do that with a child. He simply has to mold the child's heart. It's already pliable. And then their potential to be trained. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You know, John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, was taught hundreds of Bible verses by his mother because she was in ill health, and she figured she probably wouldn't live very long to see John grow up, and she was correct. She died when he was around 8 or 9. And his non-Christian father was a sea captain, and he followed his dad to go into, sailing the seas and becoming a sailor. And for years, he lived a wild and immoral life as a sailor back then. And one night, they got caught in a storm, and it looked for sure the ship was going to go down. And all those verses came rushing back into his head that his mother had taught him as a child. And he cried out to God for salvation, and the rest is history. He eventually went to seminary, became an Anglican minister, wrote that hymn, Amazing Grace, that we sing. But don't miss the golden opportunity when they're young. Had his mother not done that, that particular hymn would probably not be in our hymnal.